session of the Conference of the Parties of the UNFCCC.
Эрхэм өндөт нөхдөө хаттай ноёдоо юуны өмнө дайны дэлхийн хэмжээнд тулгараад байгаа байгаль орчны гурвалсан хямралыг харилцан уялдаатайгаар цогцоор нь шийдвэрлэх гарц шийдлийг эрэлхийлсэн чухал сэдвээр нөхөн арга хэмжээг зохион байгуулж байгаа та бүхэнд талархал илэрхийлж байна.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, my delegation would appreciate for the organizers addressing very important subject to solve global tripartite environmental challenge via synergetic and interlinked approach and solutions.
Өнөөдрийн нөхөн арга хэмжээнд Монгол Улсын байгаль орчин аялал жуулчлалын сайд Ноён Баатард нь оролцох төлөвлөгөөтэй байсан боловч Монгол Улсын төрийн тэргүүн ерөнхийлөгчийн хамт чухал арга хэмжээнд оролцох зайлшгүй шаардлага тулгарсны улмаас оролцож чадахгүй болсонд та бүхнээс гүн хэлцэлж байна.
Unfortunately, the head of delegation of Mongolia, His Excellency Mr. Minister Batirdan Batolzi, could not join in person for the side event due to the heavy schedule of the President of Mongolia during these days. He conveyed his best wishes to the side event.
Газар зүйн байршил, ландшафт, байгалийн тогтоц, түүхэн уламжлал, хөгжил дэвшил зэрэгээс шалтгаалж дэлхийн улс орнууд олон ялгаатай ондоошилтой болж буй энэ цаг үед хүн ардын амжиргааг тэтгэх, улс орны хөгжлийн үндэс суурь болсон газрын асуудлыг энэ удаагийн уур амьсгалын өөрчлөлтийн тухай нэгдсэн үндэсний байгууллагын суурь конвенцийн талуудын 28 дугаар баг хуралд чухалчилж авч үзэж байгаад Монгол Улсын засгийн газар байгаль орчин аялал жуулчлалын яамны зүгээс гүн талархалтай хандж байгаа.
At the age of high and strong change and diversification of the member states' development, geographical circumstances, landscape, and ecosystem condition, as well as historical, cultural, traditional change, the priority of the land is becoming one of the core fundamental issues during the 28th session of the Conference of the Parties of the UNCCD, which supports the human health, well-being, and livelihood support. In that, the government of Mongolia, through its Ministry of Environment and Tourism, we would like to appreciate.
Монгол улсын хувьд газар нутгийнхаа 30%-ийг улсын тусгай хамгаалтанд авч хамгаалах, биологийн олон янз байдлыг хадгалан хамгаалах, 600 мянган газрыг нөхөн сэргээж, дороотлыг хязгаарлах, хүлэмжийн ялгарлыг 22.7%-аар бууруулах гэсэн амлалтуудыг Риогийн 3 конвенц болон тэдгээрийг хэрэгжүүлэх механизмуудын хүрээнд тодорхойлж үндэсний болон түншлэгч нарын хамт хүчээр олон арга хэмжээг авч хэрэгжүүлэн ажиллаж байна.
To have its 30% of land under the protected area management while conserving and protecting biological diversity, to rehabilitate 600,000 hectares degraded land and desertificated land, to reduce greenhouse gas emission by 22.7% is the pledge of my country for the Rio 3 conventions and their mechanism. And also we are taking the action and implementing a wide range of national and international development partners.
Хэм төлөөлөгчдөө Монгол Улсын ерөнхийлөгч Ухнагийн хүрэлц бүхийн 2021 онд санаачилсан тэр бум монд үндэсний хөдөлгөөний хэрэгжилтийг хангах ажилч буй салбарын хувьд 40 сая гаруй модыг ургуулan үндэсний хэмжээнд 65 сая гаруй тарьц суулгацыг бэлтгэсэн. Энэхүү санаачлагыг үндэсний оролцоотойгоор тулгуурласан орон нутгийн иргэд аж ахуй нэгжүүдийн тогтолцоог ханган бүх түвшинд хамтын хүчээр улам үр дүнтэй хэрэгжүүлэх боломж дүүрэн ажиллаж байна.
As a ministry in charge of the Pavilion national movement, initiated by the President of Mongolia, His Excellency Khurulsukh in 2021, we have planted 40 million trees and successfully secured 65 million high survival tree seedlings for the next year preparation.
Хуурай хээр зохирсон Төв Азийн өндөрлөг улсад байрладаг Монгол орны хувьд хуурай хээрийн экосистем нь Монгол улсын хөгжлийн гарц нөгөө талаар эмзэг байдал нь болж байна. Уур амьсгалын өөрчлөлтөөс үүдэлтэй байгалийн гамшиг газар ашиглалтын уламжлалт хэв маягтай холбоотойгоор эмзэг байдал нь нэмэгдэж байгаа нь ландшафтад байгальд суурилсан шийдлүүдийг нутагшуулж түүнээс салшгүй хэсэг нь болсон мал аж ахуйг зохистой хөгжүүлэх хүн ардын амжиргааг тэтгэх боломжтой юм а.
This effort only can be achieved and potentiality with full support and collective cooperation by its citizens, local communities, enterprises of the country, where the large territory and small population. Geographical condition has a massive coverage of dry land, pasture and grassland, and at a level of high altitude at the Central Asia is also, on the other hand, becoming our vulnerability. Due to natural disasters, climate change impact, and land use change, this vulnerability is increasing, and therefore it is demanding to make transformative change through nature-based solutions, interlinking with its principal resource, livestock agriculture, in order to enhance well-being of the people and also the future generation.
Доктортой бөгөөд байнгын санхүүжилтийн олон хэлбэр арга замыг эдийн засгчид гаргаж байгааг сайшаан хүлээн авч байна. Газрын доктортой менежментийг хэрэгжүүлэх ухаалаг ашигласан $1 эргээд $22 системийн үйлчлэгээ үзүүлдэг. Байгаль хамгаалал зарцуулсан $1 эргээд сүлжээгээрээ буцаад $15 оруулдаг тухай судалгаа байдаг. Байнга хөрөнгө оруулалтыг байгаль орчны өгөөж тулгуурлан тэргүүлэх шалгуур үзүүлэлтээр хийх нь үр өгөөж ашгийг нэмэгдүүлж тогтвортой байдлыг хангадаг тул энэ чиглэлд түлхүү анхааран ажиллах нь чухал байна.
Mongolia also highly appreciates for the economists for their initiatives to improve and maintain the sustainable and permanent financial solutions and the gateways. Recent data shows that $1 spent smartly and efficiently to the land management can bring $22 as a net worth, and $1 spent to the nature conservation can bring $15 back as an ecosystem service return. Having strong and dedicated investment indicators in line with the nature and environment should be the heart and priority in order to strengthen the efficiency and deliveries.
Энэ дэшрэмд энэхүү талуудын баг хурлаас гарах тогтвортой хөдөө аж ахуй, уян хатан хүнсний тогтолцоо ба уур амьсгалын өөрчлөлтийн тухай Эмиратын тунхаглал, уур амьсгалын өөрчлөлт ба уулын мөслөг, мөсөн голын бууралт дороотлын асуудлаарх хамтын ажиллагааны тунхаглал гээд салбар дундын зохицуулалттай олон санаачлаг баримт бичгүүдийг дэмжих бөгөөд ингэснээр газрын зохистой менежментийн асуудлаар эерэг үр нөлөө хувь нэмрээ оруулна гэдэгт итгэлтэй байна.
I would like to inform all the participants that Mongolia has expressed its support for several declarations thus maintained to improve the synergies amongst cross-stakeholder and intra-stakeholders, such as the Emirates Declaration on Sustainable Agriculture, Resilient Food Security and Climate Change, as well as Declaration on Cooperation on Climate Change and Mountain Glaciers Degradation. We have a deep belief that these synergetic and systematic documents based on cross-cutting platforms would support the effective implementation and restoration action towards land and land management.
Өнөөдрийн энэхүү тусгай арга хэмжээнээс эдгээр чиглэл рүү хандсан шийдлүүдийн зөвлөмж, саналууд гарна гэдэгт итгэлтэй байна. 2026 онд Нэгдсэн үндэсний байгууллагын цөлчлөлтөд тэмцэх Суур конвенцийн талуудын 17 дугаар баг хурлыг зохион байгуулах орны хувьд Монгол улс та бүхэнтэй хамтран ажиллахад нээлттэй байгаагаа илэрхийлж байна. Баярлалаа.
And also, we are expecting today's meeting would develop good lessons learned and solutions and ideas to solve all these issues towards the land. As a host country of the 17th session of the Conference of the Parties to the UN Convention to Combat Desertification in 2026, Mongolia would like to express its readiness to cooperate with you all. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for your remarks, and I was struck by the huge leveraging potential investing in land restoration has for the benefits accrued. I would like now to invite the Deputy Minister from the Korea Forest Service, Mr. Sang-Seon Leon, to take the floor.
Good afternoon. I'm Im Sang-seo, Deputy Minister of Korea Forest Service. It is a great pleasure to meet policy decision makers from various countries and leaders from international organizations, civil society, and the private sector. I would like to express my deep gratitude to the Secretariat of the UNCCD and the GRI Coordination Office for hosting this event. According to the first data dashboard presented by the UNCCD in October, over 100 million hectares of productive land were lost annually worldwide from 2015 to 2019. In order to reverse this trend, I believe that we need to enhance collaboration among governments, civil society, and private sector, and international organization, and humanity needs to carry out feasible actions. In this regard, I trust that today's event will be a significant opportunity for global cooperation and a call to action. I would like to take this opportunity to share the Korean government's work in land restoration. 2023 marks Korea's 50th anniversary of national forest restoration efforts. In 1973, the first national 10-year plan for reforestation was established as a policy framework to restore the war-stricken land. We now have the sixth National Forest Plan in place, which is the foundation of the Korea's current forestry policy and the legacy built on the principles of the first plan. Korea's large-scale reforestation actions went beyond tree planting. It brought about its ambitious results through comprehensive policies and efforts toward organizational reform of the government, law enactment, shifting cultivation, and fuel support, and erosion control projects that actively incorporated incentives. The involvement of the scientists in the process of development and the selection of the tree species was crucial, enabling efficient afforestation that fit the environment. Not only was this process brought to life by strong leadership of the central government, but also through active participation from local governments, regional communities, and the private sector. Korea continues to pursue actions to protect the lush forest established through such endeavors. As an example, I would like to introduce an example of restoring areas damaged by large-scale wildfires. In the past, our goal was to simply remedy damaged areas from forest fires, but later expanded to establishing a comprehensive process to systematically respond to increasing large-scale forest fire damages. In order to promote regional restoration and enhance local community engagement, a council consisting of various stakeholders was organized and contributed to improving governance for land restoration. We also made groundbreaking improvements of regulations for effective restorations and established system for government support, while significantly expanding campaigns with private participation. Next, I would like to introduce Korea's actions on prevention and restoration for global desertification. The Changwon Initiative was launched in 2012, and ever since, the Republic of Korea has been collaborating with UNCCD, UNEP, and partner countries. These partnerships carry out activities such as establishing the concept of land degradation neutrality, investing in research, and developing policy frameworks, and enhancing awareness. Collaborating with the UNCCD global mechanism, Korea is restoring forests and contributing to improving income for local residents in various regions of South America, Eastern Europe, Asia, and Africa through the Greening Dryland Partnership. We aim to expand these efforts to the Southern African Development Community region and Pacific Island nations. In 2019, at the 14th UNCCD Conference of the Parties, we launched the Peace Forest Initiative that promotes land restoration projects in border regions and areas of multi-ethnic coexistence to foster cooperation between regions and ethnic groups. We continue to actively seek funding opportunities for large-scale project implementation, collaborating with partners in Central Asia, the Mekong sub-region, and the Horn of Africa region. Korea recognizes the urgent need to expand the diversify funding for desertification, prevention, and restoration. The Korea government continues to implement numerous bilateral and multilateral ODA projects, striving to mobilize more private funding. Many private companies seek opportunities to collaborate with international organizations on ESG, and in order to build on this, we launched the Business for Land, that is B4L initiative, at the 15th UNCCD COP in 2022. Our P4L event is to be held in 2024, and it is our intention to further develop this initiative. As we aim for land degradation neutrality by 2023, investment in resources, technology, knowledge, and experience for land restoration must be expanded. Korea has aligned its efforts with the Global Land Initiative, and I look forward to strengthening our cooperative ties for even greater synergy in the future. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Deputy Minister, for your remarks. We'll now move right on, and I'll invite Mr. Anil Jasinga, Cabinet Secretary of the Ministry of Environment of Sri Lanka. Okay, I have just been informed that Mr. Jasinga has not got here, so we will go to our next speaker, which is Ms. Genevieve Chinyere, the Great Wall Ambassador from Senegal. Welcome, Genevieve.
Wow. Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, how are we all doing today? I want you to just take a second and look at your neighbor and say congratulations. Why are we saying this? Because you guys are the heroes of our country, of our nation, of our world. So congratulations. Can we give ourselves a round of applause? Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. I stand before you today to address a crucial point that directly impacts the well-being of our land and the resilience of our communities. We gather here to discuss the urgent need for scaling up land restoration initiative, particularly in the context of the land and drought resilience in Senegal's Great Green Wall and your respective countries, of course. This ambitious project aims to combat desertification and land degradation, and I cannot stress enough the importance of its success for our shared future. Land degradation and drought pose significant challenges to our environment, economy, and social fabric. As we witness the encroachment of the desert upon our fertile lands, we face the risk of losing valuable ecosystems, agricultural productivity, and livelihoods. The consequences of such degradation are dire, including food insecurity, water scarcity, and mass migration. However, we refuse to succumb to despair. Senegal has demonstrated unwavering commitment to combating these challenges head-on. We have implemented numerous initiatives aimed at restoring degraded lands and building resilience against drought. These initiatives include afro-reforestation programs, sustainable land management practices, and the promotion of renewable energy resources. Through the Great Green Wall Initiative, under His Excellency Macky Sall, we have taken significant steps to restore degraded landscapes and enhance the livelihoods of our community. By planting millions of trees and implementing sustainable land management practices, we are bringing life back to our once barren lands. We are empowering local communities to actively participate in land restoration efforts, fostering a sense of ownership and collective responsibility. But our efforts cannot stop here. We need to scale up these initiatives, expand our reach, and mobilize greater resources. Land restoration is not a task that can be accomplished by isolated actions. It requests a unified global effort. This is why the conference of COP28 today holds an immense significance for our cause. COP28 has offered us an opportunity to rally the international community and garner support for our land restoration initiatives. We must urge the global leaders to prioritize funding and technical assistance for the land restoration projects, including the Great Green Wall. We need their commitment to providing the necessary resources, knowledge sharing, and capacity building to ensure the success of these endeavors. Furthermore, COP28 has provided us a platform for us to share our experiences, lessons learned, and the best practices with other nations facing similar challenges. By creating networks of collaboration and cooperation, we can forge partnerships that transcend borders and work together towards a sustainable and resilient future. Our hopes for the future are firmly rooted in the success of our land restoration initiatives. We envision a Senegal where vibrant ecosystems thrive, where our agriculture system are resilient to drought, and where our communities are empowered to adapt to changing climate conditions. We envision a great green wall that stands tall not only physically but also as a symbol of our unity and determination to combat desertification. In conclusion, scaling up land restoration initiatives is not just an option, it is an imperative. Senegal has taken significant steps towards restoring our land and building resilience. However, we cannot achieve our goals alone. We call upon the global community to support us in our endeavors, to recognize the importance of our land restoration, and to commit to meaningful action. Let us seize the opportunity presented by COP28 to forge partnerships, secure funding, and create a sustainable, resilient future. Together, we can turn the tide and ensure that future generations inherit a world where the beauty and bounty of our lands are preserved for all. I want to leave you all with a quote, and I think some of you may be familiar. And it says, "If you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together." Let us all come together, united, to make a difference in each of our respected countries. Thank you all for having us here.
Thank you very much, and thank you really for underlining the value of cooperation and partnership, without which we will not be able to get the results we're looking for at scale. I would now like to invite Mr. Anil Jasinga, the Cabinet Secretary of the Ministry of Environment of Sri Lanka, to make a statement. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to just discuss some points of land restoration initiatives in Sri Lanka, basically, and some more. I'm honored to be here as the national focal point of Sri Lanka to UNCCD to share the land restoration initiatives of the country. Sri Lanka is endowed with a rich natural resource base that sustain the nation. It is also rich in historical evidence of hydraulic civilization and socio-ecological production landscapes. The unique landscape of country is characterized by a variety of landforms ranging from flat plains to a very complex assemblage of mountains, ridges, plateau and valleys. Occupying the southern central region of the country, Central Mountains Massif rises up to 2,524 meters at its peak. Sri Lanka has 103 river basins, of which the Mahaveli River basin is the largest, spreading from central highlands through the north central area to the eastern coast, covering approximately 1/6 of island. Basically, the 103 rivers, from central highlands, they spread all over the country. That's the beauty of it. Ancient sustainable production agro-ecosystems, village tank cascade systems are found in river basins which are not connected hydrologically to the central land massif. Land resources are used by many economic sectors such as nature reserves, forestry and plantations, agriculture, irrigation schemes, human settlements, industries and infrastructure, which consists of many types of landscapes and ecosystems. Land use changes have transformed natural land cover to farmlands, human settlements and urban centers. It is observed that strong linkages in present trends of land use changes with deforestation, biodiversity loss and land degradation. Increased population pressure on different types of natural land has resulted in many consequences of impacts on the ecological environment. Therefore, it is important to identify the status of land resources and trends in land resource processes and pressures to reserve negative trends with sustainable management responses, focusing on critical gaps in allocation and management of land resources and responding to address externalities. Although Sri Lanka does not have a risk of desertification, land degradation is a severe problem. Hence, we have taken several positive initiatives from policy level to operational level. Let me briefly come up with some of them. Environment policy and national mineral policy highlighted the land restoration strategies to overcome land degradation. The UNCCD promotes actions that protect the restore and resources such as soil, water and biodiversity to achieve land degradation neutrality by 2030. Under the theme of sustainable land management, the National Environment Action Plan highlighted the land restoration activities, especially in critical natural ecosystems and environmentally sensitive areas. Lastly, the National Action Plan, prepared in collaboration with all the stakeholders, mainly focused on soil and water conservation on degraded lands. I would like to mention about operation level initiatives. Number one, scaling up the productivity of village tank cascade system, our historical system of the dry zone in Sri Lanka in a sustainable manner. Village tank cascade system of Sri Lanka is one of the globally important agricultural heritage systems as declared by FAO. And in fact, even modern days, if you take adaptation measures in Sri Lanka, the restoration of village tank cascade system is considered as one of the best adaptation methods, because if you go there, you would see that, though they are man-made tanks during ancient kingdoms, they don't look like man-made because it's a total ecosystem. I would like to give a quick overview of restoration of village tank cascade system. Actually, the Ministry of Environment has undertaken Healthy Landscape project that is being implemented in the Anuradhapura district in Thirappane and Palugasa, two divisional secretary areas. The Healthy Landscape project is a UNEP JEF initiative that aims to mainstream biodiversity using an integrated land management approach in the cascade system to ensure development, health, and environmental co-benefits. The project is to restore the degraded land forest area and promote agroforestry system. Here, of course, we have undertaken several very important initiatives like ecotourism, and when it comes to ecotourism, the people living there, they must gain the benefit out of this thing. So we have a module that in that manner, and of course agriculture, agroforestry, and especially we have elephant man conflict. Adjacent to a forest area, so we are giving certain solutions to them as well, and of course the water. That's the main thing, because if you take this old cascade system, many of them have been silted, and they are in dilapidated situation. Though Sri Lanka is small, you wouldn't believe that we have about 40,000 such man-made tanks during ancient era. So, two, rehabilitation of degraded agricultural land and central highlands. This JEF FAO project implemented in Kandy, Nuwara and Badulla district restored selected degraded lands in the mentioned districts through implementing a micro watershed rehabilitation program. Of course, as I said earlier, we have lowlands and the highlands. Highlands are in the middle, so all these rivers cascade from the highlands, and which is a beauty, but on the other hand, which causes the land degradation due to human activity. And also, we had the Mahavali project, huge project for irrigation purposes of the lowlands, the dry zone, and we see that we have made about 5 to 10 new reservoirs, and by now some of the reservoirs have silted 50%. So, and also these reservoirs bring in not only water for agriculture, but also hydropower. So, silting by 50% means the 50% of the water for agriculture is reduced, and in the meantime 50% of hydropower goes down. So therefore now we are trying to sort of desilt these new tanks, and in the meantime Sri Lanka desperately needs ecosystem restoration in the highlands, because unless that is done, the land degradation will continue. Then forest landscape restoration through the public-private partnerships, HSBC, IUCN, and the Forest Department of Sri Lanka are joining hands with communities towards forest landscape restoration. Core project aims to restore 25 hectares of land under the Forest Department using the Restoration Opportunities Assessment Methodology tool. The scientific restoration of mangroves in Sri Lanka, degraded lands, that is also on the cards. The National Policy on Conservation of Sustainable Utilization of Mangrove Ecosystem in Sri Lanka was approved by the Cabinet Minister of on 22nd of 2020. In fact, Sri Lanka was considered as the leader of mangrove restoration in Commonwealth. And then I'm happy to say that very recently, maybe 2 weeks ago, I got a letter from UNEP Executive Director that Sri Lanka was, we have applied for this flagship, and Sri Lanka was selected as one of the flagships on mangrove. So the national strategic plan we have developed, and national guidelines we have developed on mangrove system, And we have about extent of about 19,700 hectares of mangrove. That's a fairly big amount. And of course, in 1980s, we saw some degradation of mangrove, especially due to shrimp farms. But then they had to abandon shrimp farms due to some virus coming in. So those patches are still there. So we are in the process of trying to restore those patches. And of course, if it is possible to increase the mangrove cover further. But then, of course, there are other ecosystems. One might think that you can increase mangrove cover, but then they are different ecosystems. So maybe we will be harming other ecosystems by just horizontally spreading the mangrove system, mangrove areas. So also there are agencies like private sector, Haley's Advantage. For example, they are into mangrove, and so there are a lot of private sector companies which show their interest. So therefore, the Sri Lanka has included a restoration of 1,000 hectares of mangroves under NDCs, under mitigation and adaptation sectors, namely forest, biodiversity, and coastal marine resources. Also, I must I would like to say, since we have 103 rivers, I will end now. Sri Lanka is a peculiar country where we have wet zone, intermediate zone, and the dry zone. The issue is dry zone doesn't have water much, and then gets drier and drier with climate change. Wet zone get wetter and wetter. So you could see, I think over news, you could see how Sri Lanka gets flooded and how people suffer. So I think the transboundary transfer of water would be a wonderful solution for this. So of course these things are capital intensive, but then we consider them as unique and essential solutions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Deputy Minister. We did receive apologies from the Minister of Uganda, His Excellency Frank Tumebwaze, but I understand that we will have some short remarks from a representative of Uganda. So may I offer the floor to you, Madam? Thank you.
Okay, distinguished honorable ministers, all delegates, my name is Jacqueline Amongin, and I'm a member of parliament from Uganda. I would like, first of all, to convey the apologies of the Minister of Agriculture, who was not able to make it here. And I also represent Uganda in the East African Legislative Assembly, where I chair a committee of environment and climate change. But I would like to give a few remarks in regards to the restoration initiatives that could be applicable in Uganda, but also in other areas. But let me restrict my remarks to Uganda, the country that I come from. I would like to say that Uganda is one of the countries that is a signatory to the SDGs, and also Uganda adopted the Africa CADAP, that is the Comprehensive Agricultural Development Program, and among that includes also the restoration initiatives. And Uganda, from the research, growing trees was the cheapest to address the climate crisis, which hence would remove 2/3 of the crisis added to the atmosphere in terms of the carbon reduction. And then also about all the agricultural land in the world, only 10% tree cover is the figure. So we believe that if this is increased, in terms of contributing to more emphasis to educating the communities on the advantages of tree planting, the contributions to mitigating the climate crisis would be significant, including a reduction in the huge amount of unproductive, degraded agricultural and forest land. So the schemes for nurseries, for example, in Uganda, to ensure that high-quality seeds and seedlings were being produced because of this, are the backbone of a successful growing program. Because research has shown that despite the fact that we are looking for resources in terms of trying to restore our biodiversity, our ecology, but still it is the human activity that has contributed largely to the loss of forest and land cover. Also, from the research in Uganda, 8.1 million hectares of land need restoration in 7 agroecological zones. Therefore, smallholders, as a strategy, provide them with the necessary incentives so that they are able to engage in the land restoration initiatives within their own localities, and that's what the government of Uganda is trying to do. Under the bond challenge, Uganda pledged to restore 2.5 hectares of land by 2020, which was a huge opportunity for delivering species conservation, increasing biodiversity, hence benefiting people and wildlife. Of course, this to a certain extent has been achieved, but there's still a huge challenge ahead that working with partners as a country, we have a strong belief that restoration in Uganda is possible, but through government taking keen awareness among the people and sensitizing the smallholder farmers. Apparently, Uganda has 84 native tree species, of which 30 are globally threatened. So if Uganda started carrying out species restoration and working with communities to bring degraded forest reserves under restoration. So looking at all the other aspects that are necessary to carry out land restoration in our different communities and member states, it's important to engage the local smallholders, because if each smallholder took an initiative, then together we will be getting to addressing our target. And Uganda has changed strategy, because Uganda believes that money may not be necessarily very available, but through the smallholder farmers, if they are empowered, then they will be walking the talk in terms of restoration of not only the restoration for people, but also restoring for the wildlife. I thank you for your kind listening.
Thank you. So that brings the first part of this session to an end. I think these have all been very inspiring and excellent examples of ambitious actions, commitment, and partnerships that have been undertaken in the different countries. One little fact that one of our speakers, Genevieve, forgot to mention was that they have raised $60 million for the Great Green Wall in Senegal, which shows that there is opportunity to find this financing. Work is being done, but we know it's still not enough. So I would like to now invite the next panel, and I think this time it was a bit lonely sitting up here, so I would like to invite the panelists to join me up here. We'll start with Mr. Plato Keep.
Yes, yep.
Please, if you can just have a seat. Yes, please. And then we have Akanshka Khatri, Charles Erhardt, and Rebecca Shirley. And this panel is going to be focusing on good practices, lessons learned, and key opportunities and incentives for scaling up land restoration, and looking at this from the perspective of the private sector and civil society. So we'll start with you, Mr. Keep, if you can share some of your remarks and perspectives.
Yes, thank you very much for having me. My name is Plato Yip. I represent a private company in China called Ilian Resources Group. And Ilian has been greening a piece of desert in China. It's called the Kubuchi Desert, total area about 18,000 square kilometers in Mongolia. We've been doing this work over the past 35 years, together with the herdsmen, with local government, with central government, now with UN system, with UNFCCC, and UNCCD, also UNEP. UNEP has an independent study on our work over the past 3.5 decades. That said that we have created over 500 billion RMB worth value on ecological assets. And now the model, when we started 30-something years ago, it is a net input. So it is not making any profit. But now the Kubuchi model, if you can Google, if you can YouTube, there are lots of information about Kubuchi model, which the Chinese government is trying to promote to BRIC countries, to ASEAN, to BRIC, to ASEAN, to MENA countries, and to Belt and Road countries. Now, the model about the Kubuchi model talks about a three-dimensional model. We have installed so far 3.4 gigawatt of solar farm, and underneath the panel we have we are growing forage grass. We are doing animal husbandry. Per Chinese moo can generate about $100 per year, and we are talking about 1 gigawatt. It's 30 to 40,000 Chinese moo. And just for another piece of information, 1 gigawatt of solar in the desert area can generate 1.6 million tons of carbon credits per year. High value, high credit, it's very credible carbon credits. So that makes the whole model sensible and sustainable. And that is why that we are trying to promote this model to countries that need it. And we are willing to share the know-how and technology and the management methods. Now we are talking to Saudi Arabia, we're talking to UAE government, and we are trying to do some work in this part of the world. I pause here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And that was really inspirational, especially since you're looking to also solve for more than one issue with this innovation. I'll now turn to Ms. Akanshka Khatri, who's the head of Nature and Biodiversity at the World Economic Forum.
Thank you, and hello everyone. Thanks for inviting me and the forum to join this expert panel. I'm already quite excited because I've actually written that case study in one of our reports, so this is wonderful. So for those of you who may not know what we do, we are an international organization for public-private partnerships based in Geneva, but over the past, say about 6 or 7 years, have been doubling down our efforts on the topic of nature. And also in conversations now with UNCCD Secretariat and the Saudi government to see how we can strengthen business and economic engagement on the topic of land in the run-up to COP16. So would be very delighted to collaborate with most of you. Couple of pieces that I wanted to raise here. I think one is we are the World Economic Forum, which means that while this is good for moral, environmental reasons, this is also an economic imperative. Many of you would be aware of the key statistic that was out of our report that more than half the world's GDP is moderately or highly dependent on nature and its ecosystem services. What does that mean? That tomorrow, if nature is disrupted, if land is degraded, we are talking about half of the world's GDP getting disrupted. So this is really an economic imperative and why businesses are now very eager to come to the table. But there is also a flip side to it. All of the cases that we hear are at the macroeconomic level. Of course, it makes sense. We do not want to be living in a world which is burning, which land is desertified, etc. So the macroeconomic case is absolutely made. What is today still weak is how do you make a business case at a unit level? What would it take for somebody within a company to be able to go to their CFO and say, this is what I wish to invest in? So that's why discussion at panels such as like this, at fora such as these, because we are ultimately here at COP28. So the signal that we get from governments and regulators to businesses is actually very, very crucial as to why they will invest in land restoration otherwise. We also have an initiative called 1t.org, or the Trillion Trees, which partners with both the UN Decade for Ecosystem Restoration as well as the Great Green Wall in Sahel. And very simply, I think it's in the name, we are committed to conserving, restoring 1 trillion trees by 2030 and mobilizing private capital for it. So as of today, there are about 90 companies which have already pledged towards this goal. So we are talking about really looking at 8 billion trees in over 65 countries by 2030. And the aim is to continue mobilizing the private sector, companies, both Fortune 500, but also small and medium enterprises to contribute to this target. And again, going back to the economic argument, this is not only for environment. Our study has shown that if you actually look at land and look at land restoration, you can create $3.6 trillion of business value and 191 million jobs. So again, shifting the narrative that we are here only to talk about the environment. No, we are here to talk about human resilience and economic productivity as we go along. The other piece that I want to mention, I know mangroves were mentioned quite significantly here. We have been collaborating quite a bit and looking at it from the point of blue carbon. So mangroves are an interesting piece, which have a relatively stronger business case because you can put it into both the net zero targets, you can look into resilience, you can look into ecosystems health as well. And why do businesses care about it? We are fundamentally talking about a resilience of supply across value chains, food security, and commodities. So, I mean, I'm based in Geneva, so everybody cares about their chocolate and coffee, right? So if you don't have healthy soils, you will have neither your coffee nor your chocolate. So that gets people mobilized. The last piece that I will mention here is when we talk about land restoration, somebody has to be on the ground to do it. But I think for most of us coming from developing countries, we know the ambition and the growth is that you move out of the rural area. You want to get a job which is more of a service job in the city. The World Economic Forum has something called the Uplink, which is our technology platform to source innovations, ideas, and businesses, and we have curated a community called Ecopreneurs. So there are about 149 top innovators which have been identified through this effort, is how do you bring together the next generation of ecopreneurs who can work with nature and not only extract from nature. So very happy to speak to anyone about that, and thank you again for inviting me.
Thank you very much. Those were excellent insights on why land restoration is not just good for society and environment, but it's good for business. So thank you for that. So we'll move right on now to Charles Erhardt, who's the global solution lead on climate change, decarbonization and nature, and the global head of climate risk, adaptation and resilience at KPMG. So.
Thank you. And thank you all very much for joining us this afternoon. Look, the first time that I was asked to speak on this topic was at COP12 in 2006, then again a few years later in Poznan, and we keep having, it feels, a lot of the same conversations covering similar ground. I think that the challenge is not only about how are we going to conserve and restore degraded land, but how are we going to maintain the progress that we make. And so very much of this is about incentives. And clearly, while the public sector has a tremendous and essential role to play in that, what has been broadly acknowledged is the essential role for private capital finance as well, being a multiplier of the resources that we can point towards the challenge. So what I want to speak about quite briefly is what is required to unlock private sector capital, private sector resources, which are not just capital, also know-how. And one of the things that I think is really important is that in many of these conversations, and I'm going to say some things that might be a little bit confronting today, but all in the spirit of trying to move the conversation forward. We frequently speak about the value that can be generated, the economic value, livelihoods value that can be generated through investment in land, and that may well be true. But to unlock private sector capital, these benefits in aggregate don't mobilize the money. What businesses need to understand is what will the economic return be for themselves and for their financial partners, whether it is the return that they can assure the bank that they will be able to provide in the term of interest payments, or whether it is in the form of much larger investors. Either way, the greater good doesn't make the money flow. It can be a motivator, it can be a powerful part of the incentive, but it's not what actually enables and unlocks. Well, what are some of the things that can enable and unlock significant private capital flows? Well, the first thing is that direct incentive, and that's what it, bottom line, right? It's going to be a return on that investment to investors. This is not to say that these investors are trying to maximize their financial return, but there has to be a financial return element. The other thing is risk, and there is a relationship between a return on investment and risk. The greater the risk, the greater the return on investment needs to be. One of the things, therefore, that we can do to lower the bar and help unlock private capital flows is to reduce the risk. How do we do that? I want to talk about 3 S's and 3 C's. The 3 S's are structures, systems, and skills. And the 3 C's are capital, collaboration, and conviction. Those structures, this is about establishing policy frameworks, governance structures as well, and as I think was touched upon briefly, in many cases when we're talking about this scale of ambition, those governance structures not only need to be at a national level, but frequently transboundary as well. So having those policy frameworks and governance structures in place that are functional, that are agile, this is an important contribution to reducing risk. Secondly, systems. MRV systems, monitoring, reporting, validation systems that are cost-effective and enable the building of trust. All right, this is also absolutely essential. But it's not just MRV systems, it's also risk management systems and conflict resolution systems, because when we are talking about this scale, there will be multiple interests, sometimes competing, and so also having those systems that can deal with conflict. Third, skills. A key element, again, when we're talking this scale, is the ability to collect and transform data into insights and the ability to translate those insights into practical action. Well, this gets really interesting, I think, because one of the skills is not just that simple information to insights to action pathway, but it is also understanding that when we are talking about this scale and indeed speed of land transformation, this requires us to think in complex systems levels, and we don't always do this well. And just to give you an example of what I mean, when we are talking about small scale or relatively small scale land restoration projects, we can pull away certain kinds of lessons. But when we start looking at landscape level restoration, then we are deeply intertwined in complex economic and social systems, and everything that we change within that system has implications for stakeholders. We need to be able to understand not only the how the ecosystem works, but also social and economic systems within those landscapes to make sure that our solutions work for all stakeholders. As I said, with capital then, it's that de-risking, it's the predictability. It is also crucial that we be further developing our ability to stack and bundle payments for ecosystem services. So yes, carbon, also water and biodiversity, because to mobilize, again, the scale of resources that we require to be able to provide investors with some confidence about return on investment. It's not going to be through a one angle solution. It's going to be bundling and stacking of investment and return pathways. Lastly, I just want to speak about collaboration. We have already touched upon the need for public and private collaboration, but I think it's much more than that. It's public sector, private sector, and civil society as well in its many forms: research institutions, community-led organizations, broader civil society organizations. And linking to that, lastly, conviction. This is conviction to outcomes, always keeping your eye on the long-term prize, which is the restoration of these complex ecosystems, not only for their own sake, but ultimately to support existing livelihoods, but also to ensure that those livelihoods are resilient to, at this point, the inevitable physical impacts of climate change. The second part of that, though, that conviction is to what I would call communityship. We frequently speak about the need for government and, in some cases, the private sector to show leadership. I agree, but I think that that leadership is important only to create space for communityship. And communityship is acknowledging that we all have important and equally legitimate voices to play or to bring to the table in decision making about how we restore and manage these landscapes. And so it's much more about that collaborative approach to restoration and long-term sustainable management rather than just leadership and imposing a vision and solutions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I must say, I really liked that last term, communityship, because when we talk about inclusion and ownership, we don't really capture the full essence of what you have elaborated on. So thank you very much for that. So I'll now turn to our last panelist, Rebecca Shirley, who's the Deputy Director, Dr. Rebecca Shirley, who's the Deputy Director for Africa at the World Resources Institute. Over to you.
Thank you, Angela, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rebecca Shirley. I'm an environmental researcher. I live in Nairobi, Kenya, and I work with a brilliant team that's spread across the continent that builds partnership platforms and uses global data tools to grow the markets for sustainable enterprise in Africa. And we like to focus on enterprise, not just because it's the lifeblood and the culture of Africa, but because enterprise is often the intersection where we find that the interests of people, nature, and climate meet. So our philosophy is that by helping to create entire sectors of sustainability through restoration, forest preservation, clean energy access and mobility, we're actually helping to create thriving economies and waves of dignified, meaningful jobs for our growing populations, all while helping the world decarbonize, all while helping to build healthy, resilient cities, all while revitalizing our landscapes and fortifying our ecosystems, ultimately the climate armor that's going to protect us in the future. So in Africa, perhaps the most visceral manifestation of this sustainability as legitimate economy model is in restoration. And this is given the over 750 million hectares of degraded farm and forest land that exist right now in Africa. Meanwhile, these lands could be absorbing and storing our carbon, defending us from droughts and storms, protecting the land, producing our food, and bringing peace. So recognizing this opportunity and these benefits, the Africa Union convened the continent's leaders with our support here at the Climate Summit of 2015 in Paris to launch AFR 100, an ambitious African commitment to restore 100 million hectares of degraded farm and forest by 2030. Since then, 34 African countries have pledged to AFR 100, and my team has worked with them using science, data, local knowledge to scope priority areas, develop national strategies, and fund local restoration. So the commitments and the targets are there, and one might then assume that the next step is large-scale solutions, perhaps a big continental tree planting program led by some international NGO. But these kinds of sweeping top-down approaches have been tried in the past with mixed results. And we find that the secret to restoring Africa isn't lying in big initiatives organized by even bigger organizations. Rather, the secret is in engaging in meaningful ways with the 60% of the continent's communities that rely on the land for their food and livelihoods. Well, why? Because smallholder farmers, entrepreneurs, cooperatives, community groups are actually some of the most effective actors already doing restoration in Africa today. And the research shows that restoration projects that are locally led and managed are up to 20 times more effective at achieving long-term success, maintaining trees, and bringing economic benefits to communities. Africa's greatest restoration success story, the Greenbelt movement that some of you might know through its founder, Wangari Maathai, our first and only female Nobel Peace Prize winner, is a testament to the power of local community in revitalizing landscapes. The Greenbelt movement, started in the 1970s, has organized thousands of women's groups across the continent to plant trees and restore their communities. And that Greenbelt movement is still alive today. And it is truly a movement. It has inspired thousands across the continent doing restoration. So this is the way that restoration is already happening on the continent, through hundreds of small efforts combined. Now, the question is, how can we turn activity like this into business models that run on their own? Well, in 2021, we tried something. We launched an open request for proposals, calling restoration champions across the continent to step forward. We felt really excited, we felt very proud because we had finances in hand to support 100 restoration champions. Well, when we launched the call, we got over 3,000 applications in 2 weeks. So this showed us that the restoration movement was actually much larger than we had even estimated as per our own research and data collection. Well, what that initial exercise allowed us to do was to indeed fund that top 100, and that top 100 cohort of projects has reported over 13 million trees planted of 420 species, with 80% survival rates for these trees, representing over 20,000 hectares under restoration. So this experience allowed us to learn so much that we were able to kickstart Restore Local. And with Restore Local, we are ramping up to match the scale of these champions by addressing 4 needs. One is growing the capacity of restoration champions so that a strong pipeline of projects is prepared to receive funds and to deliver impact. 2 is deploying the finance needed to ready champions through grants, through loans, and through commercial investments, establishing the market and the business place for restoration product. 3 is building the platforms that allow them to track, verify, and report their progress in accurate and cost-effective ways. And 4 is continuing to secure the public policy that incentivizes their activity. We believe that over $500 million of philanthropic support will leverage billions more in investment from banks, impact funds, and corporates for thousands of these local businesses. We've already raised about 30% of this goal, so we were able to kickstart yet another round of funds this year. And in 3 particular target anchor landscapes, the Great Rift Valley, the Ghana Cocoa Belt, and the Ruzizi Basin in Central Africa. So using these funds, our latest cohort of 93 projects, which is going to be announced in January of 2024, receives over $18 million in grant, in loans, and in investment. And they will represent another 14 million trees planted and an additional 40,000 hectares of land under restoration across these 3 landscapes. So it's going to be baby steps, but we're aiming for 100 million hectares across the continent. As I said, you can see we're doing cohorts of 40 to 60,000 hectares at a time, and we can get there with scale because, as I mentioned, this is all being led through community, and that is the ultimate route to sustainability. And about 70% of the 100 million hectares that we hope to restore in Africa are already under community management. So supporting community is the way to get there. Angela, I want to thank you so much for the opportunity to share that experience, and I hope that you will all welcome us in what we like to call the restoration generation in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shirley. Thank you. Been very efficient, so we do have some minutes left for questions, comments, reactions, or even additional insights from where you're from. So who would like to take the floor first? Any questions? Okay, while they're thinking about this, one of the things that struck me in the conversation is how to get to scale. At this COP, we're talking about what next through the stocktake, which has shown that not much is happening on climate action. Land restoration, of course, is a key component also of driving a solution that we do need to address, the current challenge. So my question for you is, we need to do more and much faster. Charles, you spoke about the complexity of trying to get to a larger scale. But from your perspective, what are the few things that we could be thinking of right now that could enable us to move faster, to achieve more, and to be able to also build on the successes that we have heard from the government so far? So I don't know who would like to start, and then I will be turning around, and there will be quite a number of questions coming from the audience.
Maybe if I can just share two experiences. I worked for a number of years in two tropical forest countries, and we were able to mobilize commitments for tens of millions of dollars, in fact, in one country extending to more than 100 million. This was private sector investment that was looking to invest in the restoration of complex lived-in landscapes. Yep. And at the 11th hour and 59th minute, this was all of that was destroyed because there was a change of elected government, and the government said that we want a switch in vision. So a switch in vision from sustainable landscapes, working with communities for the sustainable growing of coffee, etc. And they said, no, we have a vision of clear cut and getting to the minerals that are underneath our forests. And all of that investment of time, the many years that it took to bring together private sector, government, and communities, civil society around the table, all up because of a change in political position and an alignment of interests. And I think that this just really showcases how, despite our best efforts and investment, it's that we can have things undone very quickly when we're thinking about change at a large landscape level, and we've got to be thinking about jurisdiction level work here. And so I think that this just really underscores that we cannot take that political commitment, conviction for granted, and we've got to be engaging and coming up with solutions where politicians who depend on election see it in their interest to support this vision and sustain it.
Sorry.
No, go ahead, I'll go.
I just chip in a few sentences here. The question is scaled up. I think it's important. How to scale up? First of all, de-risk, because if you want private sector to come in, risk is a huge factor. And also how to recognize these ecological assets. In China, the entire country is it's undergoing digital transformation. In deserts, we are also using different kinds of technologies, from IoT, to drones, to robotics, to plant, and to capture the carbon credit and put it on chain so that certifiers and verifiers can come in as a node, and all these carbon credits can transfer to the carbon exchange. So the private sector sees the data as it is transparent and immutable. I think this is important. And also we built ecological big data system to decide where to plant, what to plant, and how to plant. This is important too, because planting in desert could be really expensive and very risky. So technology can jump in, and blockchain technology particularly can play a critical role. And we're now trying to hook up with Hong Kong as an international financial market to recognize all these technologies. That actually there is another section in the afternoon, the 6th, in the China corner, that we've been talking about issuing green bonds, the carbon market, how we can incentivize private sector participation in this theme. Thank you.
I would add to that. So as I mentioned, I think a lot is being done to put the plumbing in place to connect restoration champions who are producing macadamia nuts, avocado, cassava, all manner of fruit and food commodity to markets. So that infrastructure is being put in place. I think to get it to really scale to the tens of thousands to the hundreds of thousands of hectares at the jurisdictional level, as you're talking about, is the beginning and the end of the pipeline. At the beginning, needing to see more philanthropic and public sector finance being put into the support of this type of infrastructure laying. So this might be either philanthropic support from donors, or we're seeing governments put their own money into this. So Ethiopia has now established the National Restoration Fund, putting a percentage of national GDP into restoration activities. Ghana the same, Malawi the same. And then on the other end of the pipeline, commercial finance, commercial investors getting involved, supporting the offtake. So I think if we start to see those two filling in, because we're already putting this infrastructure in place that's acting as market linkage, we're going to start to see the scale that we're looking for.
Maybe just complementing everything is, I think for me it would be two things. Is we need to get out of project finance mindset. We're doing too many projects, and often the ticket size is so small that it just doesn't make sense for private sector to be able to come in, even if you de-risk, because of political issues, because of governance structures. So I want to pick up on what you had said on payment for ecosystem services and really creating nature markets. So we are at COP28, so obviously a lot of negotiation and conversation is on carbon credits, carbon markets, but there are other ecosystem services as well, right? So there is water credits, there is soil health, there is biodiversity credits. So one has to think about this holistically as a nature market, and just exactly what you said. A government leader has to win elections, has to provide jobs, has to provide livelihoods. If a standing tree does not bring me money, I will cut that tree down. So the question is, as the international community, are we able to fairly price for that tree and the ecosystem services that standing tree provides? So for me, that would be one, fundamentally thinking about nature markets. And around that, don't just bucket people into they will do the conservation while someone will come and do the money. Where is the local capital market as well? Where are the buyers and the sellers? Again, let's not perpetuate things that went wrong because of years and years. The second piece related to that is, how do we combine indigenous knowledge with scientific rigor? Because a lot of projects on the carbon credit side, biodiversity credits, they fall apart because the cost of MRV is way too high. And the people who are doing the work on the ground may not always have the technical capacity or technological capabilities to be able to constantly keep doing the MRV. But they have shown results that they've been able to steward these lands for health. So there is a new way of thinking which is required, is how do you integrate science with indigenous people's knowledge so that we are looking at a different way of communicating, a different way of showing results, and a different way of also being able to finance these things. And I know a few companies and financial institutions are looking at it. For example, ANZ Bank in Australia is working with an indigenous leader who just happens to be an indigenous leader but has a brilliant business model of harvesting sea cucumbers. I mean, collagen is very good from sea cucumber. So pharmaceutical, beauty products, everybody needs sea cucumbers. But you harvest them for 3 months while you protect and restore for the rest of the year. So I think we need to find those two pieces. What's your go-to market strategy? And how do we combine indigenous people's knowledge into the mix?
Thank you very much. Last call. We have 1 minute. You need the mic.
Hello, I'm Renee Young. I'm from Australia. Great to hear you pick up on the sea cucumbers. Thank you, panel. Incredible examples coming out. Very different examples. And I had a question about how you're defining restoration, ecological restoration, and the applicability of standards. And are you considering standards in your practices?
I'll leave the definition to the experts, but I think, at least for us, you look at the baseline, and of course, I know that is quite debatable in terms of what you determine, and in Australia particularly, how do you determine the baseline of nature health would be. And ecosystem restoration is anything which shows either you stay at the baseline or ideally you show an uplift wherever there degradation. So I think very, very simply put, standards and frameworks, there are too many. I think that's the problem. I think there is at some level, there is a need for consolidation. So there could be common principles or common basket of metrics that can run actually across all of them. It's easy for carbon, so you just are measuring for CO2, but then you're not looking at what people traditionally call co-benefits. So I think for me, those would be bigger issues, like how do you create standards, frameworks in a way that is easy to implement on the ground, as well as is commonly shared, rather than just someone sitting in a corporate office saying, this looks good on my Excel sheet, but doesn't make sense on the ground.
And that is, at the same time, you don't want to set the standards too high so that people cannot come in. I think this is also important. And then it's a great question, actually. Carbon is standardized now. You can have gold standard, Vera, but in our example, if you want to restore a piece of desert, there's no standard, okay? That you have to really work it out yourself. And then perhaps in the later stages, you can talk to international organizations or other countries to try to formulate a standard that people can easily come in. This is my viewpoint. Thank you. Up to you.
Okay, so
Thank you. I like this question. There's one thing in particular that I'd like to use this to flag, and I think that it is, as we go forward, it's not just about restoring, for example, the productivity of a forest ecosystem, and I'm not just talking about productivity in terms of human metrics. But to me, we have got to be thinking more and more about the resilience of the systems that we restore. We are past the point where we do not need to consider about how the physical impacts of climate change are going to affect these ecosystems. And we know that we have many forests that are already under profound threat. So if we're going to restore in the design of that, what we're thinking about, we've got to be thinking about how we're going to do this in such a way that it's going to be last. What selection of trees, collection of trees, et cetera, needs to be factored into our design.
any last word?
Yeah, I think it's a really fantastic question, especially because every donor has a different thing that they're trying to track as their indicator, and even slight differences in what you mean by a hectare restored or a tree planted can really vastly change what a stakeholder on the ground then has to measure. So I think affordability is one of our key ambitions for MRV systems. What we have found at WRI is that using a satellite imagery-based technology and system allows us to sort of have a trade-off of, we know that we're actually able to track trees planted, which then allows us to estimate carbon, et cetera, et cetera. It doesn't allow us to track for ecosystem benefits like soil health and water quality, but then you rely on the ground information directly from champions to fill in those gaps. So we're trying to find a balance where affordability ultimately is at the core, or else the MRV system will just not be sustainable.
Okay, thank you very much. I will not make an attempt to summarize these very rich discussions, but I hope that they have given you some insights and inspiration on what is needed to scale up and accelerate our efforts on land restoration. I hope you have a better appreciation of the incentives and the role of government and the importance of the new word I learned today, communityship, the involvement of all stakeholders to own and drive these efforts forward. So please join me in thanking all our panelists from the first and second panel, and the UNCCD for having organized this very, very inspirational panel. Thank you very much.